Hey, welcome to Crypto Ramble. I'm Desiree. I have a question today that I'm going to ask myself and also try to answer for you. And that is, what is going on with Steemit? That's the social blockchain and platform that exists. There's also DTube, 3Speak, and other social platforms that have been built on top of it. I'm sure if you've been looking anywhere online, there was a story in Yahoo Finance and also on Twitter in the crypto space. You found out that a lot of people are angry at Justin Sun, the founder of the Tron blockchain, who has a very big marketing budget and a great ability to talk and say the right things. Now, I'm going to try to not just hate on Justin Sun, because in my research, looking at what's going on and hearing other people comment on it, realized that it's not so cut and dry as centralization versus decentralization in terms of Tron being the bad actor and Justin Sun being the bad actor. It does have a lot to do with the infrastructure of Steem, and I think that's what I want to get into when I'm talking about it, thinking about code versus law and existing infrastructures that we have. So to give a very quick rundown, you probably already know what Steemit is. It's a website that you can go on, and there's a social media platform, so people post videos, messages, kind of like blogs, YouTube's. It's its own thing, so it can be similar to other platforms that exist. But the key thing about it is that a few years ago, I think 3 years ago it was built on top of the Steem blockchain. So it has its own token that powers the social media platform, and its whole purpose is for decentralization, because there was a lot of, and it's still going on, a lot of censorship happening with social platforms, a big one being YouTube. And so people came up with this solution. There's Steemit, and then there are other platforms that sort of run on top of Steemit. Those include DTube and another one called 3Speak. I care a lot about censorship and deplatforming, so I've been on Steemit for a very long time, and there were a lot of users on the platform at the beginning with the bull run in 2017, but then that sort of dropped off as a lot of people seem to disappear and not care so much about building the platform. And there have been some creators that have stayed on over time, posting every day, and it definitely has a strong community out there. So recently, earlier this year, Justin Sun with his Tron Foundation bought Steemit Inc., and Steemit Inc. is the company that holds funds and sort of organizes the development of the blockchain. And there were some funds set aside to be used for the development of the blockchain. And when this Steemit Inc. contract was handed over to Justin Sun, it included his ownership of that set aside portion of Steem. Now, that set aside portion at the beginning was only meant to be used for developers, and the way that you direct where those funds go is that a certain number of users, who are called witnesses, are able to validate the blockchain. They kind of act like miners, but what happens is that they are given voting power because they've been voted on by the rest of the network to have their proposals funded. And so those funds were set aside with that notion in mind, but it wasn't encoded. This was just people saying, yes, we're giving you these funds and we're voting for you, and you're only going to use those funds to develop things, not to direct it exactly how you want. Now, Justin Sun may or may not have understood that. I think the people who don't like him clearly think that he was just acting badly, but it's possible that he didn't understand that just because he has tokens means that he can't vote with them. And so when that transfer occurred from Steemit Inc. to Tron Foundation, the current lead witnesses who had that kind of power sort of disabled the stake that Justin Sun had. They took away all the power that he might have had because they were worried that he might act badly. Now, that is a precautionary step, and maybe Justin Sun might have thought that was hostile and then so responded to that. I don't really know. I don't really want to get into people's feelings necessarily, but the more interesting thing is what happened with the exchanges afterwards. So Justin Sun worked with Huobi and Binance and Poloniex to use the funds that other users of Steemit had put their Steem tokens, left them on these exchanges. They used them in order to stake and change who the lead witnesses were. And so they de facto gave themselves the power that the existing community voted witnesses had. that's really interesting because exchanges are very centralized and they're acting like banks. And even though people are just putting their money there in order to just leave it there for whatever reason, these exchanges who are acting like banks are making that money work for them. So they're kind of loaning out the money or assigning it for a different purpose than simply holding the funds for users. Now, I think that's on the fault of the users for not caring enough about Steemit to say, I'm not going to give trust away to these centralized exchanges. And if you think about cryptocurrency, it's about decentralization. And if you don't want to have enough responsibility to care about where you leave your tokens, then who can you blame? And that is one of the issues that comes along with handing power to the people, and you can do that through blockchain. So it brings up a lot of governance and whether or not people can be trusted like against themselves, and maybe not thinking about the consequences and repercussions of leaving their funds on an exchange in that manner. So after the existing witnesses did decide to freeze Justin Sun's stake, and then he did this thing with the exchanges and put himself back in position, now everybody's really angry. They're calling it a hostile takeover. It's kind of strange that Justin Sun was calling the existing developers and the existing lead witnesses hackers, because they were responsible and are responsible, at least for now, for the development of Steemit. So that seems ingenuous, but at the same time, it doesn't matter what people say is right philosophically. If the code doesn't actively enforce that, then you don't really have that power. And so for me, my answer is this is supposed to be a learning experience for people to understand that you need to have these things built into the code. If you want decentralization to be trustless, then you need to make it in fact so. And I don't know if that can really be achieved, because then how do you organize? Like, the reason why they set aside these tokens is in order to organize to fund the development, but then you see how that can be co-opted and taken over. So I don't really want to take the side of one person or the other. I think it's funny how the exchanges were acting like banks, and even though many people just think of them as holding the tokens, they use the power of the network because it's like staking and you can delegate votes basically. And I don't really know where it's going to go, but blockchain is about understanding human nature and then using technology to work around that. And if we're surprised or think that something like this wouldn't happen or won't happen again, then I think that's foolish. So we'll see where it goes in the future. But I use Steemit. I guess I'm kind of disappointed. I don't want to say that it's going to be horrible if Steemit becomes just a Tron application, and I don't know what plans Justin Sun has or if you can really trust what he stated he's going to do. I think they could possibly be good, and I think people who are upset about the governance, well, it says a lot about human nature, and you need to build it into the code, and people also need to be responsible. So I'm not surprised, and it might happen again. I know that now Steem users, myself included, are voting for the original or earlier witnesses, but if the code doesn't have the necessary power to avoid or evade whatever the people with the laws and the court system, the legal system have backing them, because that is really what it comes down to at the end of the day in terms of who has the power or not. If a contract was signed, then a contract was signed, and if the network can't nullify that contract, even though maybe with these Steem votes it can, then maybe the network isn't decentralized enough, and that's something to consider. There were some Steem executives that have resigned because they see it as rebelling against this centralization effort that's going on. And I also think it's really sad for people like me who may not like the direction things are going in, who have been posting content to Steemit in order to keep the platform relevant. But on the other hand, I really think this is should just be viewed as a learning experience, and not like, oh, I'm so angry. It should just be viewed as, well, this is human nature, and if you have the tools built a certain way, they will be exploited. So I think that's my general take on this situation, and I hope that Steemit survives. There's so many different decentralized content platforms out there, it's hard to know which one will do well. And I think DLive and DTube are also going to be affected from what I understood. So we'll see where it goes. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Bye. And leave a comment and let me know what you think.